Hey everybody, how's it going? My name is xSlamFox, and I was recently filling out some of the later tiers of the Mastery, and I'm trying to get to MR30, and I noticed that Diemos Arcana included a few easy things for some Mastery rank with these new Kitguns. I saw these Kitguns and I figured that, they're relatively cheap to buy. You can buy them from Father or Vilcor, depending on how far you've gotten in this quest. He sells all the pieces for around 500 standing each. When it comes to actually making these parts, they're not terrible to make either. They are very accessible, very light on the entry costs, I think. So the two guns that he has are the Vermisplicer and the Sporelacer. You will notice that he has a nice wide array of new things available for sale, but only these two, the Spore, whatever, and the Sporelacer are the two guns that are actually going to add to your MR rating. The other parts are simply to change your grip or your loader. I haven't tested out these new parts, and I would love it if somebody else gave me an honest review of what you think about them. I browsed through all of these parts, and honestly, I do think everything is a little bit expensive, just a little bit expensive. And I know it seems very reasonable, but then when you start to make this stuff and you start having to mine multiple ores and you start thinking, oh, I need to mine 40 ores to get 20 of this ore to make one of this part. And then if you try to make like a brand new Infested Kitgun and you try to put together a new primary with a new grip and a new loader, these material costs can really start to stack up, in my opinion. Personally, I would love it if they removed some of the additional costs to creating gems and ores, especially the ores. But for right now, I just grab a copy of each one. We have the Vermisplicer, the Sporelacer, the Ulnaris, and the Polmaris, I think. Palmaris. So all these four items, I thought that the Ulnaris and the Palmaris would actually be new weapons too, but they're just grips. So all they really do is change whether it is a primary or a secondary weapon. I was missing a couple of Sporulate sacks for the Sporelacer build, so I went out, I did just a little bit of fishing, probably around 15 minutes. It wasn't terrible, but I did get one of the glutinoxes that I needed. And so right here I pick up a glutinox, and that gives me the Sporulate sack that I needed to build this. It wasn't terrible to get the materials. I think it's not bad, but definitely could be better. And it'll probably start to stack up a little bit if you're trying to build multiple copies and experiment with this. But for now, not terrible. So I just throw together a pretty random collection of parts here. I had some spare parts left over from some of the other Kitguns that I had tried and some of the other meta Kitguns that I had tried to copy. So the Vermisplicer, I made a pretty standard primary Kitgun. I made a nice in-between grip. I didn't actually use the Palmaris or the Ulnaris. I'm not sure about the damage differences on these or how things actually go. I chose not to use them just so I could get like a baseline feel of how it would compare to old Kitguns. So I just went for some nice standard stuff, and they both seemed a little bit weaker. So I just chose like a nice standard loadout on these Kitguns. So for the second gun, I'm going to grab the Sporelacer, I'm going to grab a Haymaker, and I'm going to grab a medium, not too bad loader, and I'm just going to make another standard Kitgun. And I think that this was a very fair and reasonable way to do this. This is how most people are going to be doing this. And I wanted to see how good or bad they were on their own with like a nice reasonable build. And honestly, they're not terrible. I tried both builds. I tried like a big damage, medium crit build, and I also tried a status build on both of these. And I do think that status is a much better choice for both of these types of weapons. So this primary one is called the Vermisplicer, and it is very aim body. It locks onto targets with aiming tendrils, and then once they're locked on, they'll continue DPSing unless you let go or if you find new targets. So this one was very weak on the damage, but if you stack up multiple different kinds of status, maybe like a viral type heat, which is the current meta, I do think that this gun can really strip away armor, deal some good damage. So right now I'm just using a Hildren with like a standard grouping effect, so I can try to see how it's doing on individual targets and groups of targets. I think this weapon has a very decent reload. I think it has a very manageable ammo economy, and I do think that you can achieve a good status chance with it, which allows you to use it in a way that would be good, you know, like as an armor strip or as like some viral stacks, so I do think it's a decent weapon. Here I switch over to the secondary, and it's a lot bigger. It's a much heavy hitter type weapon, and in my mind it gives me a feeling something more like Pox, if you know Pox as a secondary or as a primary. It's a big cloud, few second lingering status effect. So again, I think that high damage or a good status on this type of weapon would be very beneficial, because that cloud effect is really going to give you a bunch of procs, and it does have a good initial hit. I think that both of these weapons are very average. I wouldn't say that they're bad, but I do think that they're good for specific uses. I think this has a good AoE and a good initial hit for a secondary weapon. I think that the primary has a very unique effect in the effect that it locks onto targets, and it's very aim-body, and it is very fast firing, and it's multiple tendrils, so it is an excellent way to proc status. I do think you would be able to get some reasonable usage out of both of them. If I have to put a tier on both of them, I wind up giving both of them about a B, I think. I think both of them are very standard, very average weapons, neither good nor bad, but definitely could be used for certain playstyles or certain things that you like the lock-on and the speed of the Vermisplicer and how much status you can actually deal. It is a pretty good weapon, I think. I think it is very usable, and these are just some raw baseline numbers. You're not looking at any crazy build with any insane Forma or Rivens here, so I do think it does have potential. And then it's just the same thing for the secondary, the Sporelacer. Again, it has a good entry hit. It has a nice cloud effect for some extra dots, and again, not terrible, and it's not Forma'd, it's not reactored, it's just a nice normal weapon firing normally, and it's reasonable. You know, it can kill stuff, kind of. So I think they do both have potential. I do think that they're both worth testing out. If it was me personally, the builds that I would go for right now on both of them, when you're building your new weapons, I would choose status over crit right now. I do think that both of these weapons would benefit from status much, much more than they would benefit from crit. And since both have a primary and secondary flex slot available, you might actually be able to take the Vermisplicer as like a backup for like a new core, you know, so it is decent. Thank you guys for checking this out, and I would love to hear back on you guys' thoughts on the new weapons, and just test them out for yourself.